Hello, in this video I will show you how to use the query function in Google Sheets. The query function is very useful and very important. Some say that it's the most important function in Google Sheets, and this is because it allows us to retrieve information. Retrieving information is very helpful, especially when we're working with very large data files. The query function not only retrieves information, but it allows us to filter it or to summarizing by computing sums or averages or other summary statistics. Um, for instance, in this file, I have the graduation rate of all of the high schools in the state of Georgia, and I can use the query function to retrieve the schools where graduation rates are extremely low, let's say maybe lower than 50, and just focus on those schools where students may be at risk of not graduating. Or I can retrieve the schools from a specific school system if that's what I'm interested in. Of course, I can obtain that information by browsing through the file and do that manually, but of course, that is going to take a lot of time and it is very much prone to error. So let's try and demonstrate how to use the query function to retrieve information from this data file. Please notice that the file has 9 columns from A to I, where graduation rate is in column I, and we have the school name in column E and the system name in column D. And I'm mentioning this because these are the columns that I am going to use or type in the syntax of the query function. And I can use the query function anywhere. I can create a query in this sheet, but typically I like to keep the data source separate from all of the summary statistics or graphs or queries. So I am trying to maintain a clean data set and all of the summaries and queries to be placed in a separate sheet. So I created a queries sheet which is blank right now, but we are going to create some queries here. Just like with any other function, we have to type the equal sign first and then type the word query. Google Sheets is going to recognize this word and it warns you that this function uses a different programming language and you have to type tab to accept that. And then you can go ahead and write the syntax for the query function. The query function has 3 main components. The first component is the data range that you want to use. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to use the data in all students sheet in my file. So to do that, first I have to specify the name of the sheet, and I am going to put that between apostrophes. So I'm going to type all students, another apostrophe, and then exclamation mark. This tells Google Sheets which sheet to retrieve the data from, and now I have to specify the rows and columns that I want to use as my data range. And I'm just going to use everything that is in that sheet just because that gives me flexibility to choose anything that I want. So I'm going to start from column A, row 1, all the way up to column I and row 1000, which is the maximum number of rows in my sheet. So this is the data range that I want to use as a source. The next section of the syntax is the select section. So I'm typing comma and then moving on to the select section. The select section has to be between quotation marks. So I'm going to type quotation mark and then select. Here you just have to specify what kind of information you want to retrieve. In our case, I want to retrieve the graduation rates and also the school names and the school system names. So the school system was in column D, the school name was in column E, and the graduation rates were in column I. Okay, but I don't want to just retrieve all of the information from these columns because that would be almost identical to the original data. I just want to retrieve some of the rows. So to do that, I have to specify a where statement. So I'm going to type the word where, and my criteria is where graduation rates, which were in column I, are smaller than 50. So let's say that this is a very critical criterion, and I just want to look at those schools that have extremely low graduation rates. And the third component of the query syntax is just simply specifying the number of header rows in the file, because those are not going to be included in the search. In our case, we have one header row. This is not mandatory, but just to be precise, I'm going to include it and then close the parentheses. So this is the syntax for my query function. I'm going to click enter, and now I can see a list of schools, and for all of these schools the graduation rate is lower than 50, as you can see here. Of course, some didn't report graduation rates, but those that did have the graduation rate lower than 50. Now, the query function allows us to write much more complex statements. For instance, I can request graduation rates that are within a specific range. I can, for instance, request the schools that have graduation rates between 50 and 69. So let's try and do that. I'm just going to copy this formula so I wouldn't have to type everything again, and then paste it in another column. Of course, please notice that now I'm getting an error message. This is because when I move the formula a few columns over to the right, the range of the data source has also changed. So all I have to do is modify the range of data that I want to use as a source. So again, I'm going to specify that I want to start at column A, row 1, all the way to column I, row 1000. And I am going to modify the select statement. And let's say that I want to look at graduation rates that are larger or equal to 50, and at the same time lower than 70. Okay, so I can use logical operators here to create a range. The query function allows using logical operators such as AND, OR, and so on. So the rest will stay the same. I am just going to click enter. And please notice that I have a list of schools now, and all of their graduation rates are between 50 and 70. As I mentioned earlier, I can use the query function to retrieve data based on different criteria. For instance, I can retrieve graduation rates for the schools in a specific school system. So to do that, I am going to just simply copy this formula again, just to save some time, and then paste it here. Of course, I have to modify the range for my data source. So this is going to be from A1 to I1000, and I'm going to change the criteria here in my where statement. So in my where statement, I want to retrieve schools, graduation rates for schools in Cobb County, for instance. So I am going to type D, which is the column that shows the school system names. So D would have to be equal apostrophe Cobb County and then another apostrophe. Because this is a string variable, I have to use apostrophe to indicate that. And then I am going to click enter. And now I have the graduation rates of all of the schools in Cobb County, including the average graduation rate for all of the schools in Cobb County, because this one was also included in the file. So this is a demonstration of how to use the query function to retrieve data based on different criteria. Of course, the query function is very complex and you can use it in multiple ways. You can include formula or you can include other functions. You can calculate, for instance, averages or sums for a set of observations. You can calculate summary statistics. So it's a very useful tool. This is just an introduction on how to use it. If you want to make any changes, you can go to the upper left corner where you typed in the formula and you can make modifications here. For instance, let's say that I want to modify the range for the graduation rate and I want to change 70 with 80. And I'm just going to do that and then retrieve a different set of observations. So this could be a dashboard where I could retrieve any information based on a variety of criteria at any time.